There are so many myths out there that mislead people. I mean, they get some of this pop psych where, somebody's lying if they're looking up to the left or right or, blah, 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 blah. There are some things that people can look at to determine whether somebody is lying or whether they're not.
One of the first things you're going to look for are the differences in comfort and discomfort. That's basically the bottom line there. And when you see someone going from comfort to discomfort, you're going to see things. We'll all cover different things about this, but I'll cover the adapters on this. And so what you'll see is that person who's becoming uncomfortable, as they try to get rid of some of this built-up stress and or tension, they'll start doing little things like this with their hand, or they'll chew on their mouth, or they may, just for a second, push their lips together, not in the disappearing lips, as or a stress mouth, but you'll see things where they'll move their shoulders a little bit to try to almost massage themselves, or they will massage themselves. You'll see them push on their face, facial denting. And these things get rid of that built-up stress or tension. That's one of the first things, I think, out of the baseline we all start looking for.
I'll take it a different path. Verbal and vocal cues. A person who tries to negotiate the question, or who tries to condition the question, or takes longer to get to yes or no, that's a good indicator that something is wrong. If they normally say yes or no, you ask them a complex question, they ramble before they say yes or no. That's distancing, verbal distancing. That's a great indicator. There are places where people hide time. I taught resistance to interrogation, and a good portion of it's tied to that. Things like saying and then. It means I just jump over a period of time. Doesn't mean they're lying. It means that there's an opportunity for a lie there, an opportunity to miss something. And then word choice changes, how the sentence is structured. There's a ton of things in there we can teach, and we do try to walk on the show. And then the sound of their voice, cadence changes. If something blips, it's an indicator. You should pay attention when something changes, because something's changing inside their little knot. And that's what's going on.
Let me take it in this direction. So there are parts of your body that are probably more vulnerable than others. If you think about the carotid arteries, the windpipe here, and just under the armpits here and around the ribs here, they're not well protected. There's some delicate organs there that if they get damaged, you're probably in big trouble. So you notice when people start getting uncomfortable about what they're saying, you might see the chin drop in. We call that turtling, because they're actually protecting this carotid artery and windpipe there. You'll see them tuck in here so they can't get attacked under here. Now, of course, they know they're not being attacked by an actual physical object, but their instinct doesn't know that. Their instinct is just under threat and pressure, and it shows up as they protect some of those delicate organs. Chase, you've probably got another way you can take this.
Yeah, and please keep in mind that there's no such thing as deceptive body language. What we're looking for is changes to baseline and things that indicate stress or fear. And a lot of this stuff is very research-based, and I'll just give one really good one that I see very regularly, that the less pronouns a person uses in a statement or a response to a question, the more likely it is to be deceptive. And second, if they pause longer than they normally do in that conversation, then that's also very solidly backed by research, both of those things.
Okay, give us an example of a statement that would use less pronouns and would cause you to red flag that statement.
Sure. So if I ask somebody, what did you guys do after you left the office Wednesday? And he says, wrapped up about 5:30, went to the store, picked up some cigarettes, went to the club, had about 17 beers, went home, played the Xbox for about 15 hours, and went to bed. So that has 0 pronouns in it.
Okay, so you're saying that there's less personalization of the statement. They don't want to own the statement or be part of or own the actions. They're distancing from the actions.
That's one of the theories. It's that, and it sounds more technical language. So like if you read the instruction manual for a dishwasher, there's no pronouns in it. So
right.
That's the secondary theory for that.
Well, and the other one that you'll notice is lack of illustrators, not using your hands to make your points, not using any kind of illustrator, sitting dead still. I see it on your show when guys are trying to get past something and their hands don't rise, they don't start talking, or they're not using their face to punctuate because they're not really telling you anything. They're just using words.
People don't understand. Your body is going to respond. You can't control all the physiological responses. Something's going to give you away if you're feeling threatened, and you can't monitor all those things at one time. When people think, I can study all this up and then I can be a good liar. Well, you might be a better liar, but nobody can control everything all the time, right?
Well, I've been studying this instinctual response for a long, long time. And I did go and take a look at some Japanese monks who had trained themselves that under an ice cold waterfall, their temperature would not reduce. They wouldn't start shivering, essentially. And so this was an amazing thing, because it's like, okay, so these people can control their instinct. Well, here's the thing. You couldn't surprise them. If you run up behind them and chuck an ice cold bucket of water over them, they start to shiver. If they knew that the trigger was coming, they could prepare. But if they don't know the trigger's coming, then they can't prepare, and they're in the same sea as the rest of us. And that's what happens under stress and pressure. If you can put somebody on the right stress and pressure, they're not ready for it. Their body will dissemble, and they'll start informing you of what's really going on. Greg, you had something to say about this.
Yeah, there are 2 points. You talk about soft white underbelly in your dog, but humans are the only creatures that walk around with it exposed. And so we need to create exoskeletons with our elbows when we're panicked and those kinds of things more than any other creature. And the second one I would say is, if you know body language, it's not always a plus. I did a History Channel special back before Abu Ghraib broke, where we took people in and interrogated them. And the way I broke one of the young women there was I educated her what I was looking for. And every time she would do it, I would say, and there you go, you're lying again. Oh, and there you go, you're lying again. Oh, and there you go, you're lying again. And she just finally said, okay, I can't hide that, so I'll give up.
Yeah, you just make them self-conscious about it at that point.
And it magnifies, because all that fight or flight then comes to the surface again and stuff starts leaking. And you're watching for all that, and you're pointing out that fidget with the fingers, that adapter, or that our illustrators are out of sync with their sentence, and they can't hide it anymore.
And that's the one thing to look for. You could teach a whole body language course on just, is that person hiding or protecting arteries or belly? And that could be just if I had to give a 1-sentence description of this is how you read a person and it was an emergency, that would be it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, exactly that, Chase. I pretty much designed all of my work on trust and credibility around the idea that we're upright hominids. And we're descendant from ground-dwelling mammals. If you think Darwin is correct, we're descendant from ground-dwelling mammals that stood up on the plains of Africa. Didn't take a day or so, took millions of years. And those upright hominids were now exposing their belly because there was an advantage to be able to see distance over the plains. I could see way ahead of time if a predator was coming, or if a potential mate was coming, or there might be food over there. I win an advantage. There's now a disadvantage. I'm not protected around that belly area. So now a lot of my thought has to go to, am I safe around here? Do I want to let people know that I'm open, I'm unarmed, and I'm unprotected around there? So a lot of our behavior goes right back at least 5.5 million years, in my view. So it's old behavior. You can't stop it. You can countermeasure it. But even then, if I surprise you, your chances are very, very low of being able to be deceitful if I can surprise you with the stress and pressure.
So if I would add one thing to that, what I always say is our systems are really primitive. And Scott, you'll have an answer to this one over the amygdala. Our brains are designed to find threat and then to respond to that threat. And it doesn't matter, and I'll just say it the way I would usually say it, it doesn't matter if it's a tiger chewing your ass or your wife chewing your ass, you're going to respond the same way. You're going to ramp up and you're going to have all that adrenaline flow and you're going to do something. And your thinking brain is going to turn off and you're going to respond. That's why we say stupid things to people we love when we're in that kind of argument, because that brain is primitive and it's taking over.
So in an interrogation situation, you can come up with questions and design your questions to elicit that behavior. And once you see that behavior, as they start to protect themselves as a person, as a human, then they start protecting themselves, not just physically, but emotionally, and what have I said, and them in their social, how they look socially. So it's important to create questions and create your questioning or form your questioning around things that are going to pop off their fight or flight, get them fired up and start moving around.
What are some tips that people can take away that can give them the confidence to build their credibility, project the confidence, increase their persuasiveness in their communications when they're putting themselves out there?
Yeah, so let me give you my number one, and I basically built my career in this, around this, which is the biggest indicator, the biggest stimulus for another human being, that you are credible and you can be trusted, because that happens in their head immediately as you approach them. They're in their head going, how good is this person, do I think, for me? Do I think they're going to be helpful to me? Are they a friend? Are they a threat, a predator? Are they a potential mate for me? And if they're none of those three, I'm indifferent to them. They don't really count for me at all. The biggest trigger for friend is open palm gestures at exactly navel height. Just open palm gestures, no tools, no weapons, nothing in my hands, and exposing that belly area right at navel height. It even changes your tone of voice. You'll notice when I place my hands here, the tone of voice changes. You'll notice if I bring my hands up to chest height, which actually instantly pushes your heart rate and your breathing rate up, just because of the way the body's built, the heart has to go harder to push the blood against gravity. You'll hear a slight intonation change to me. As I drop my hands down here, you get a very different intonation change. And that's not anything I'm putting on. My body naturally does that. So just open palm gestures, navel height. It's great for trust and credibility.
Yeah, it's astounding. I talked before about primal in tucking in your chin and going into closed body position. That's read the same way with animals, right? You approach a dog that can be threatened if you go at him like this, but if you go open palms down, then the dog doesn't see you as a threat near as much as he would in any other posture you can present, because that's not a posture from which you can mount an attack. So even that is a primal sort of communication.
Well, especially with dogs, because dogs grew up around us. I mean, literally, they evolved. They were domesticated with us. So we share limbic resonance. That's why we're around dogs. And just like you and Scott here and Greg and Chase, we all have dogs. And my guess is all of us at times go, God, that dog's really kind of human. That's like a real human being. Biologically, it's nothing like us at all.
Exactly.
Nothing like us whatsoever. The genetic difference is so huge in reality. But the limbic brain is very, very simple, very similar. It has a social mammalian brain that grew up alongside us. So the triggers are really similar. And so we tend to call them out as human beings and go, they're really human. I'm sure dogs look at us and go, I think that's a dog. That's a dog just like me. I'm sure they don't think we're human. I'm sure they think we're kind of these odd, upright dogs in reality.
I think one of the important
so.
things that we should cover is how your brain gathers that information, and that we're seeing in open palm gestures and the behavior we're seeing in people. We've got three parts of the brain that we always deal with when we're gathering information. You have the fusiform gyrus, that's right in here, and it's about a 1/4 inch in. And that's what collects all the little things you see in somebody's body language. Then you have the mid-temporal gyrus that's a little bit up this way, and that collects all the big moves, all the big body language moves. And then these two things, as they collect this information, send it back to a thing called the locus ceruleus. I know this is horrifically boring, but I think it's important. We should go over it. So it sends it back to the locus ceruleus, and that's what gives you the gut feeling, or the most powerful thing in the world, the women's intuition, because it starts sorting through this information and starts comparing it to everything you've ever dealt with before in your life, or everything it's ever seen in other people that you've ever dealt with in every situation. That's why sometimes you'll bring someone home from an old army buddy or someone from college or high school, and you'll say, honey, this guy is my buddy from high school, and you're going to love him. And he's going to come over Saturday. We'll eat and watch a movie. So you all cook and eat, and your wife loves him, and he's the nicest guy in the world. You guys had the best time. And by the time it's over, and your wife's been really nice to him up to this point, no sooner does it, as you're hugging the guy, oh man, it's good seeing you again, Phil, or whatever his name is, and then you send him out the door, and the next thing you know, your wife turns to you. No sooner does the door shut than she looks at you and says, don't you ever bring that back in this house again. Do you understand me? And you say, well, what's wrong with him? He's one of my best friends ever. And she says, I don't know. There's something not right about him. That's because her locus ceruleus hasn't quite yet put that information together and given it to her. It'll come to her in the shower or when she's driving or something she's doing all the time. Her brain's just sitting there and her body's doing something. But that's where that information is gathered, and that's where that female woman's intuition comes from, and as men, we get a gut feeling. I think that's an important part of what we're talking about, the neurological aspect of it.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
And what's fascinating is that mammalian brain that's down there processing this stuff is incapable of human language. So it can't send us a text message and say, well, the blink rate went up. He started doing this. He covered his groin when he was talking about his credit score or whatever. But it's an emotion communicator. So the gut feeling cannot come through in English because it's been doing that for so long. And when it gets to trust and credibility, if there's one thing that fear makes our bodies do is it speeds them up. If you look how fast a Chihuahua moves when there's a sound in the house versus how fast a Rottweiler moves in response, the more scared animal moves quicker. So even if we're with somebody and we're start moving quicker, we're blinking faster, our hands are moving faster, that's sending that subconscious signal, just exactly what Scott was talking about, that maybe we shouldn't be trusted, that maybe I'm a little bit less trustworthy. So if anyone's trying to build trust or credibility, this truth pain thing is absolutely fantastic. And I would do the exercise of never move faster than if you were standing in a swimming pool. And make that your go-to if you're in sales or speaking to somebody.